Merhaba, hoş geldiniz. Uzun bir aradan sonra bir Yesayan Salonu'nun etkinliğiyle yeniden birlikteyiz. Bugün Chris Bohjalian var karşımızda. Amerika'dan bağlanıyor bize. 13 Kasım'da Chris Bohjalian'ın Kumdan Kale Kızları romanını çıkardık. Bugün onun üzerine konuşacağız. Görüşmemiz İngilizce olacak ama bu zaten canlı bir görüşme değil. Kaydediyoruz. Sonra üzerine altyazı çalışmalarımız olacak ve size bu şekilde sunacağız. O yüzden görüşmemizde altyazılar olacak. İzleyebilirsiniz. Chris Bohjalian'ın 14. romanı Kumdan Kale Kızları, Sandcastle Girls adında Doubleday'in çıkardığı ve Yana Gül'ün Türkçe'ye çevirdiği bir roman bu. Görüşmemizde romanla ilgili konuşacağız genel olarak. Karşımda Ekin de var aynı zamanda. Ekin Kurtdarcan. Aras'ın editörlerinden Ekin de. Kısaca başlamadan önce Yesayan Salonu'nu size tekrar hatırlatmak istiyorum. Geçen yıl bu zamanlar açmıştık Yesayan Salonu'nu. Aras'ın yeni ofisinde, Aras Yayıncılık'ın yeni ofisinde. Herkesin kullanımına açtığımız bir alandı burası. Çeşitli kültürel etkinlikler düzenlemek için Yesayan Salonu'nu açtık. Kağıt üzerinde bizim idaremizde olan ama aslında bizim dışımızda herkesin de kullanımına açmak istediğimiz ve bunu Yesayan Salonu'nun açık kalabildiği 4 ay boyunca da başardığımız, çok sevdiğimiz bir alandı. Ama bildiğiniz gibi Mart ayında ara vermek zorunda kaldık etkinliklerimize ve bir süre online olarak devam ettirdik. Yazın uzun bir ara vermiş olduk. Şimdi de tekrar umuyoruz ki online olarak etkinliklerimize devam edeceğiz. Yesayan Salonu'nun çok yakın zamanda bir internet sitesi de açılacak. Oradan da takip edebilirsiniz zaten ileriki etkinliklerimizi. Lafı daha fazla uzatmıyorum. And we can start our interview now.
So, thank you for joining us. Maybe we can first begin by talking about how you feel about the Turkish publication of your novel. I mean, you've been writing and publishing for a very long time, but this is the first time you're being published in Turkey and in Turkish. And so, also, how do you feel about this being the Sandcastle Girls in particular?
Well, first of all, it's a pleasure, it's an honor, and it's a privilege to be speaking with all of you today. Thank you. I'm honored that the Sandcastle Girls is being published in Turkey. This is its 21st or 22nd language, at least. But it's actually not the first time that I've been published in Turkey. My earlier novels, Midwives and The Double Bind, were published, 13 and 18 years ago in Turkey. But this is special.
Wow, okay. We're very honored to be actually publishing the Sandcastle Girls as well.
I have to tell you, the cover is so beautiful. The book looks magnificent. The work that you have done on it, well, it moves me so deeply. I am so humbled and so grateful to all of you for making this happen. 2020 has been, in most ways, a horrible year, a truly horrible year. But small pleasures like the Turkish publication of the Sandcastle Girls are big pleasures and go a very, very long way.
I should also mention, I'm so happy that you like the cover. I should mention that it belongs to an artist, Arzu Başaran, that we use her painting on the cover, and it also we love the cover as well. It makes us really happy that you love it as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was from an exhibition on 1915, so it also has that special meaning for us. So this is your 14th novel, and just thinking about like how personal the subject seems. Why didn't you write this novel earlier? Like what at that point in your sort of writing life, like what made you or what pushed you to write this?
Yeah, great question. The Sandcastle Girls is not the first time that I tried to write about the Armenian genocide. In 1992, when I was 30 years old, I wrote an entire manuscript about the Armenian genocide, deeply inspired by my grandparents, who were both survivors of the Armenian genocide. 392 pages. And when I read the finished draft, it was, as we say in America, a train wreck. It was a truly terrible novel. It was written by me when I was young and still learning my craft. And all it is 392 pages of anger. And a novel can't be 392 pages of anger. Novels are about character. They are about stories that move us. E.M. Forster once said, "We all know that fiction is truer than history because it goes beyond the evidence." I thought about that a lot. So I took this manuscript when I was 30 and I set it aside. And if you're ever in Massachusetts in America, you can go to my college where my papers are stored and you can read this unpublished manuscript. But I wouldn't waste your time. It's horrible. So instead, I wrote a book about an American midwife on trial for manslaughter, became midwives, and that worked out rather well. In 2008, I wrote historical fiction for the first time. My novel, Skeletons at the Feast, about one German family's complicity in the Holocaust. And when I finished that book, I finally had the courage to approach historical fiction again and go back to 1915. I was, 16, 17 years older. I had written at least 8 or 9, 10 novels since then. And so I knew how to move the pieces around the chessboard. I knew what I wanted to do, and I wanted to this time approach it differently. It shouldn't be my grandparents' story. It should be the kind of historical fiction I love, which are love stories. So I decided this time to approach it from the perspective of my favorite historical love stories. Captain Corelli's Mandolin, or Atonement, or The English Patient. Love stories set in the midst of war. So that became my model. And that became the format essentially for the Sandcastle Girls, which is fundamentally in my mind a love story. It just happens to be set in the cauldron of Aleppo in the Ottoman Empire in 1915.
Yeah. Actually, this makes a really nice transition into my next question, because I wanted to talk a little bit about your character, your main character, narrator, Lora. Well, she's a writer and she's Armenian American and trying to kind of make sense of her family history and sort of the legacy and trauma of the genocide. And just like thinking about also like your previous attempt at writing about the genocide, the sort of the reader undoubtedly makes that association between your narrator and you yourself as the writer. And so how intentional actually was your choice to make your main character a woman rather than a man? So what were the sort of like implications of that? Why did you make Lora a woman?
Great question again. First of all, Laura Petrosian is me. I mean, that is a female version of me. Laura Petrosian's childhood is a female version of my childhood. Mm-hmm. Her grandparents' house was my grandparents' house. And there are so many little details of my childhood in her story. I was the fictional version of her brother. I was the fat little boy, beginning of the book, whose mother forced him to sing Herman's Hermits pop songs in red knickers. That was me. That really happened. When we moved to Florida, my first girlfriend was Turkish. Wow. And I had no idea of the cultural implications of that because at this point, my grandparents had passed away. So it was only at the party that appears in that book that I began to understand the familial politics and the landmines that I was walking into. So why did I make Lora a female and not just me? Well, when I began to understand what this book was about, it seemed to me that women are 1,000 times better than men at being in touch with their emotions and to sacrifice everything they know about themselves on a familial quest. Lora comes across this photo and it changes everything for her. And my sense that if Lora were male, she would be less likely to make that dramatic a leap of faith that I need to know the story. That's why I made Lora a female version of me.
Yeah. And I feel like you've done a great job portraying a female character. And since we're talking about characters, my first question would be about the character development in sense of this is a very personal story for you, of course. And in comparison with your other novels or with your previous writing process, how difficult was that to was it difficult to distance yourself from the characters? Because I think it's a necessity while writing. And was it difficult, or how difficult was that, since it's a personal history?
I love your questions. They're really good.
Thank you.
Very often, I would write a scene and I would realize I was falling back on that young man in 1992 and losing the novelistic eye in the sky. I wasn't thinking about what would Armin do? What would Karine do? What would Lara do? All it was what would I do? And I'm irrelevant. One of the things I love about what I do for a living is every morning I'm in this room and my characters take me by the hand and lead me through the dark of the story. So whenever I was allowing the things that I knew about what my grandparents had experienced, or what I would come across in my research, And I would be using it just to cathartically expunge my anger. I would literally take a step back and try to get back into the groove of, this is Ottoman's story. This is Elizabeth's story. This is not your story.
I should ask at this point, were you looking, since this was some sort of a, let's say, a kind of a therapy for you, was after writing it, have you felt any different towards history about Armenian genocide than not before writing?
Oh, this book changed my life. It completely changed my life. Not just in terms of emotionally, not just in terms of really understanding what made Levon, Bohjalian, and High Grishadenian tick, what made them human beings, and my wonderful grandparents. The fact is, since this book was published, I've journeyed to Kayseri, to Van, Adana, Gaziantep, all across Anatolia and Cilicia, rediscovering that part of my ancestry and my DNA. I mean, the fact is, when most Americans go to Turkey, we go to Istanbul, we go to Ephesus, we savor, the essentially coastline and western part of Turkey. We don't go to Van. We don't go to Kars. We don't go to Adana. And I've probably been to those places 5, 6 times. And it's all because of the Sandcastle Girls. It's all so that I can walk the walk. I mean, I feel a connection to that earth that I never knew I would feel.
I don't know if this question would be a little, I'm not sure if I can make myself clear, but I will try. It's about, I think, the theme of somewhat obscurity and evidence. So when we're discussing Armenian genocide, the documentary evidence is very important. This is what everyone, denial comes from that to begin with. So I think this, from the 2 German photographers in your story, that they're trying to leave this documentary evidence. And then we follow this story through its the securing this evidence. And then when we come to this day, it's the lack of evidence that we read in Lora's family history, because there are so many obscurities in her own family story. And we, from the publishing house, three of us read the story, and we all had different outlines for her family history about what really happened between the grandparents. So I wanted to ask you, this is a decision, I think, to bring that forth. This comes forward, and I think this is a decision. So can you a little talk about that, maybe? This
Sure,
evidence,
sure.
obscurity.
Yes. My own family history has tremendous gaps. Survivors of the Armenian genocide either leave behind lengthy memoirs, thank goodness, or they don't talk about it. My grandparents never talked about it. My grandfather had 3 brothers. In 1915, they all made it to Cairo. They were alive. And yet, they all disappeared. They're completely lost to history. And my grandfather would never talk about what happened to them. My grandmother, we knew that her father was very well established and provided horses, cavalry horses, to the Ottoman army, and had for years. In 1915, rather than acquire the horses legally, as the army always had, they simply shot him, confiscated the horse farm, confiscated the herd, confiscated even the family townhouse in Istanbul. And my grandmother would never talk about that. It was the end of her life when these stories would slowly emerge, but only at the end of her life. So there were always these gaps. And I think these gaps were one of the mysteries that I had in mind when I was writing The Sandcastle Girls. There are gaps in Lora's family history. Now, about evidence. The two German engineer photographers are inspired, as you probably know, by the German military field nurse, Otterman Wegener, who photographed the Armenian genocide until Ottoman authorities said to their German ally, make him stop. So Germany sent him to a cholera ward, figuring he'd get cholera and die. And he did get cholera, but then he got better. And he went right back out and continued chronicling the genocide and smuggling the prince out of the Ottoman Empire and back to in terms of denial, it was very important to me that all of the genocide stories in the book are founded on fact. So, for example, the American Council in Aleppo, Ryan Donald Murphy, is based on the actual American Council, Jesse B. Jackson, whose granddaughter-in-law I've met. And a lot of what Ryan Donald Murphy says are the things that Jesse B. Jackson said. Likewise, the German Council in Aleppo, Ulrich Lange, is based on Walter Rosler, the actual German council in Aleppo, and some of Lange's writings in the novel are Walter Rosler's actual writings. The only genocide moment in the novel that has no historical moment that I could ever corroborate is whether Americans such as Elizabeth ever might have gotten to actually see firsthand Der Zor. All of our witness accounts of Der Zor are from Armenians or the Red Cross, but not from somebody like Elizabeth Endicott.
Oh, I see. That's why they actually, well, I should not spoil it for the readers, but now I understand that there's his story with Elizabeth, and yeah, okay. I shouldn't spoil it for the readers. Okay.
You're spoiling. You're doing great.
Thank you. You too. My last question. This is my last question. But yeah, I should ask it and then we can move forward. It's about Mark Nishanian. When we're talking about this literary canon, we do talk about him a lot. We reference his Writers of Disaster book a lot because how he says that talks about the impossibility of writing a disaster, writing about the Armenian genocide through the means of art, literature, because you can't capture the whole incident in its entirety. But there has been many attempts about writing about Armenian genocide, and I can easily say that I love Sandcastle Girls. I love the story, and I did read a lot of both historical and fictional and non-fictional stories about Armenian genocide, of course. It's definitely one of my favorites. I wanted to ask you about what is your favorite? Do you have a favorite in this, let's say, genre? Yeah.
Come with me across my library.
Okay.
Let's see if this works. I don't know if you can see this, if the lighting is enough, but here.
Is that the gendarme?
We see,
yes,
I see
the gendarme.
We'll publish it very soon. And there I see Nancy Krikorian's Dreams of Bread and Fire.
Yep, the 40 Days of Musaddam.
Of course.
The Bastard of Istanbul. And then there's Michelle.
But we're
including, of course.
I think we're
on.
Yes.
Too dark. Okay.
Not too dark, but we're losing you on that side of the room somehow.
I see. Okay. But if you stand the Nazi, everything from Hrant Dink to Peter Balakian, to Taner Akçam, and on the fiction shelf, yes, you will see Mark Mustin and Nancy Krikorian and Franz Werfel, Carol had got in.
Okay. This will be it for me. By the way, I think I just mentioned that, but for our viewers, Ekin and I co-read the story. So this is why we're doing this together. We did this together, and we are really happy to have you here. This was truly an honor, and now it all falls into place for me somehow after reading it, talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Before we sign off, could I just say hello and give a big shout out to Osman Kavala? Just a great, great, wonderful man, still in jail. And I just want him to know that I don't forget him, and America doesn't forget him. And I don't think more than 2 weeks go by when I don't reach out again to Amnesty International and to PEN on his behalf so that we remember the great humanitarian, historian, literary person, and civil rights person, Osman Kavala.
Thank you so much. I'm sure this would mean a lot for him and for everyone who supports him since day one here in Turkey. Thank you. Thank you for this message. So this is it then.
Thank you so much for publishing such a beautiful edition. Thank you for your faith in my work. I hope that it has a great, great success, and well, I'm just so honored and privileged. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're also very honored for publishing your book. This was, it's a cliche way to say it, but this was such a great journey for us. Thank you.
You too. Stay safe. Stay sane.
You too.
You too.
See you, Chris.
Bye.
Take care.